Have you ever wondered what happens when top-down government planning completely collides with the messy reality of human psychology? Well, let's dive right into this explainer, because today we're unraveling a massive historical paradox, a multi-billion-dollar ghost plant, and we're going to use the science of human behavior to figure out exactly how it happened. Picture this for a second. It's the 1970s in Austria. The government has just finished building a massive state-of-the-art nuclear reactor in a place called Zwentendorf. The facility is completely done, the tech is locked in, and it's practically humming, ready to power up. And yet, it never produced a single watt of electricity. It literally never went online. And the economic stakes here were just staggering. Abandoning this plant meant walking away from a massive 7 billion shilling investment, leaving it completely unused. For a country the size of Austria, just ditching an asset of that scale was practically unthinkable from a purely financial standpoint. So how on earth did this happen? Part 1. The Secret of Zwentendorf. All through the 1970s, Austrian Chancellor Bruno Kreisky and his team of technocrats really championed this mega project. Their timeline was super clear. The original goal was to open the doors in 1975, expecting it to essentially double the country's electricity supply to feed a booming economy. They basically assumed that voters were perfectly rational actors who jump at the chance for economic growth and cheap power. But by 1978, the public pushback was so intense it forced an unprecedented national referendum. Moving on to Part 2, the myth of absolute rationality. So why did the government's models completely miss the mark? Well, if we dig into peer-reviewed social science, specifically studies looking at norm-guided behavior, we can see exactly why human beings completely defied those strict economic expectations. You see, the technocrats were operating under this traditional Homo economicus model. It's built on the assumption of absolute rationality. It assumes that you and I can simultaneously compare every single available alternative, perfectly process all that information, and then calculate the absolute optimal choice. It essentially treats a human being like a flawless, emotionless computer that only cares about maximizing its own utility. The politicians basically thought, hey, we're giving you cheaper energy and limitless economic growth. Obviously, you're going to say yes. But academic reality, supported by researchers like H.A. Simon, proves that this expectation completely ignores how human cognition actually works. Unlimited cognitive ability is, frankly, a total illusion. Which brings us to Section 3, Limits of Reason. Instead of absolute rationality, we humans actually use something called bounded rationality. This is a concept that recognizes our decision-making is pretty severely restricted. We have limits in our memory, limits in our mental computational power, and, of course, limits on our time. Because of all that, we don't seek some mathematically perfect optimum. Instead, we rely on systematic shortcuts, things like learning, imitation, and adjusting our baseline expectations based on our surroundings. Think about the sheer limits of computing power for a second. In computer science, benign problems can be solved fairly quickly. But malignant problems, like the famous traveling salesman problem where you have to find the absolute perfect route, those require exponential time. If even an advanced supercomputer chokes on these highly complex real-world variables, then full, absolute rationality is permanently impossible for the human brain. Next up, Section 4, Emotions and Social Norms. Beyond just our computational limits, we're also driven by strict emotional boundaries. I mean, we experience behavioral paradoxes all the time, right? Like knowing smoking is terrible for us, yet still struggling to quit. We're driven by altruism. And critically, we have this intense psychological need to reduce cognitive dissonance. That means even if something offers objective economic utility, like cheap nuclear power, we'll often flat out reject it if it feels internally wrong or conflicts with our deeper values. And this right here explains exactly why the protesters at Zwentendorf mobilized with such incredible force. Researcher Karl Dieter Opp actually found that anti-nuclear activists were heavily guided by shared social norms. For these Austrian protest groups, like the grassroots environmental initiative known as the IOIG, the social norm of prioritizing health and safety completely overrode this selfish, individual pursuit of cheap electricity. They weren't acting irrationally at all. They were just playing by a different set of social rules. Finally, Section 5, a political paradigm shift. Get a load of this exact margin, 50.47%. That is literally a razor-thin margin. But it was exactly what the Austrian public needed to vote no to turning on this Zwentendorf plant. It was incredibly close, but it was enough to stop a multi-billion shilling project dead in its tracks. When you look at the raw numbers, it's wild. Over 1.6 million people actively voted against their own immediate economic utility. 1,606,308 voted no, against the 1,576,839 who voted yes. This proves without a shadow of a doubt that social norms regarding safety and the environment were powerful enough to completely overpower the promise of a massive government investment. The people essentially looked at this 7 billion shilling facility and said, "No thanks, our peace of mind is worth more." And the Zwentendorf vote didn't just stop a single power plant. It was a total game changer. It sparked a lasting paradigm shift, marking the definitive end of top-down technocratic planning in Austria. It catalyzed these massive grassroots environmental movements and directly led to the foundation of new green political parties. The power had officially shifted from the technocrats right back to the citizens. So we've seen the proof. The perfectly rational Homo economicus is basically a myth. We humans are beautifully complex, driven by bounded rationality, messy emotions, and powerful social norms. So if we accept this reality, that human beings are absolutely not cold calculating machines, how should governments plan the mega projects of our future? How do we build a world that actually accounts for human nature rather than fighting against it? It's a massive question that every modern society is going to have to answer.